It was late at night when I reached one of the quieter districts of London. I used to travel there every 3 or 4 months, and every time I stayed at a distant relative's house, my aunt, who lived all alone in a small, old house. That night, as my train journey ended and I walked down the silent streets, the air felt heavier than usual. The lamps along the road flickered, and the chilly wind carried with it an unsettling stillness. By the time I reached the lane of my aunt's home, the clock had already touched midnight. I expected to find her asleep inside, since she had no idea I was coming, but what I saw left me frozen on the spot. There she was, standing right in front of the house, holding a dimly lit hurricane lamp in her hand. The orange flame wavered inside the glass, casting long, trembling shadows across her face and the old walls of the house. I stood still for a moment, confused and startled. How could she possibly know I was coming? And why would anyone in London in this modern age stand outside with an old-fashioned hurricane lamp? Electricity was available in this area. I had never seen her without lights before. My footsteps slowed, and my heart began to beat harder. She looked straight at me and, in a calm yet strangely heavy voice, said only one word: "Come." The way she spoke made my skin crawl. It wasn't welcoming, yet it wasn't hostile either. It was something in between, something that didn't feel human. For a moment, I thought of turning back and leaving, but against my better judgment, I walked towards her. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt, because her eyes didn't blink, and her expression never changed. Without another word, she turned and walked inside, the hurricane lamp swaying in her hand. I followed silently. The darkness of the house swallowed me the moment I stepped inside, and I had no idea that this was only the beginning of the most terrifying night of my life. As I stepped into the house, the dim glow of the hurricane lamp flickered against the walls. The place felt unnaturally quiet, almost as if time itself had slowed down the moment I crossed the threshold. My aunt, without saying anything, walked ahead of me, the light swaying with her every step, until we reached the dining room. And then I froze. Spread across the dining table was a full meal, plates upon plates of food, freshly cooked and steaming, as if someone had been preparing for a grand gathering. There was rice, curries, meat, bread, fruits, and even desserts, neatly arranged, like a feast waiting for honored guests. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at it all in disbelief. My aunt lived alone. She didn't even know I was coming. Then why? Why was there so much food? I tried to calm myself. Maybe she had cooked earlier, some relatives had visited, or perhaps she had been expecting company. But deep down, something felt wrong. The silence of the house, the absence of electricity, and now this feast, it was all too strange. Still, she gestured towards the table with her free hand, and said softly, "Eat." Her voice sent a shiver through me. It was flat, emotionless, yet carrying a weight that made it impossible for me to refuse. I sat down slowly, trying to act normal, and served myself a small portion. The food smelled fine, tasted fine too, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly off. Every bite felt heavier, as if it wasn't filling my stomach, but instead sinking deep into my chest, like a stone. I glanced at her while eating. She stood in the corner of the room, the lamp in her hand, watching me silently. She didn't touch a single plate. She didn't even sit down. She just stood there, staring, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor. When I finally finished, she nodded once, almost as if satisfied. I excused myself and made my way to the guest room I usually stayed in. The air inside felt colder than I remembered. I closed the door behind me, sat on the bed, and tried to push the unease away. But as I lay there in the darkness, one question kept hammering inside my head. If she hadn't known I was coming, then for whom? And why? Had she prepared that enormous feast? I tried to sleep, but the house felt alive in its silence. The wooden beams groaned softly, and the cold air carried a heaviness that pressed down on my chest. Every now and then, I thought I heard faint footsteps in the corridor, but when I listened carefully, the sound would vanish, swallowed by the stillness. Sometime past midnight, a soft knock came at my door. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. Before I could respond, the door creaked open on its own. My aunt stood there, her hurricane lamp flickering in her hand, her face half lit, half hidden in shadow. "Come," she said again, her voice lower this time, almost like a whisper that echoed too loudly in the quiet. Reluctantly, I followed her into the sitting room. She lowered herself into a chair, and I sat opposite her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She stared into the flame of the hurricane lamp, as though the fire held secrets only she could see. Then, without looking at me, she asked, "How is your father doing?" Her words hit me like a stone. My throat went dry. I hesitated before replying, "Kala, my father passed away 2 years ago. Don't you remember?" At that, she slowly lifted her gaze toward me. Her eyes looked distant, unfocused, as if she were staring through me rather than at me. Then she nodded faintly and muttered, almost to herself, "Oh, yes, I forgot." The way she said it chilled me. It wasn't the absent-mindedness of an old woman, it was something else, something wrong. Her words didn't sound like they belonged to her. She then leaned forward, her voice shifting into a strange tone, and asked me about people long-gone relatives who had died years ago, neighbors I barely remembered, and even her own husband. The more she spoke, the more uneasy I felt. It was as if she didn't know or didn't want to know that they were all dead. Finally, she looked at me and said in a disturbingly calm voice, "Wait a little while. Your father will be here soon, along with my husband." I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went cold, my body stiff. Her husband had been dead for many years. My father too, gone. The lamp's flame wavered as a draft of wind passed through the room. For the first time, I realized her lips were curling into something resembling a smile, but it wasn't warm. It wasn't kind. It was hollow, unnatural, like a mask stretching too far across her face. My pulse raced. Something deep inside me screamed that I needed to leave. That was the moment I understood. The woman sitting before me, the one speaking in my aunt's voice, might not be my aunt at all. The room grew unbearably tense after her last words. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at her as the flame of the hurricane lamp flickered between us. Shadows crept along the walls like living things. My aunt, if it truly was her, remained silent for a long moment, watching me with unblinking eyes. I forced myself to speak, my voice trembling. "Kala, what are you saying? My father is gone. Your husband is gone. They can't come back." For a second, her face remained blank. Then, very slowly, her lips stretched into a smile. At first, it was faint and awkward curve that seemed out of place. But then, it grew wider and wider, until it no longer looked like a human expression at all. Her teeth glimmered in the dim light, and her eyes, dark, empty, and unblinking, locked onto mine. And then it began. A sound, low at first, like a soft chuckle, escaped her throat. It was dry, hollow, and unnatural. The chuckle grew louder, stretching into a grotesque laugh that echoed through the entire house. It wasn't the laugh of my aunt, it was something else. Something inhuman. The laugh rose and broke, sometimes high-pitched, sometimes guttural, as if multiple voices were tangled together in that single sound. The walls seemed to vibrate with it. I pressed my palms against my ears, but still, the sound burrowed into my skull, sending chills down my spine. "Wait for them," she hissed between her laughter. "They're coming. Don't you hear them?" I couldn't bear it any longer. My body screamed for escape. I shot up from the chair, nearly tripping as I stumbled backward. My aunt, or the thing wearing her face, remained seated, her mouth still wide, laughter spilling out into the air like poison. I ran. I didn't even stop to think. I flung the door open, dashed down the staircase, and burst out of the house into the cold night air. My lungs burned as I gasped for breath, but I didn't stop. Behind me, through the half-open window, I could still hear that laughter echoing faintly, chasing me through the empty streets. I kept running until I saw the faint neon glow of a small hotel sign. My legs ached, but fear kept me moving. I stumbled inside, rented the first room I could get, and locked the door behind me. Only then, with my back pressed against the wall and sweat dripping down my face, did I allow myself to breathe. But even in that hotel room, I couldn't shake the sound of her laughter. It clung to me, replaying in my mind again and again. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I knew, with a dreadful certainty, that whatever I had seen in that house wasn't truly my aunt. When the first light of dawn spilled across the city, I gathered my courage and left the hotel. My body was weak from fear and exhaustion, but I knew I had to return to the house. I needed to see it again in daylight to convince myself that what I had experienced was nothing more than a terrible dream. The streets were quiet, almost peaceful, as I walked back. But the moment I turned the corner and saw the familiar old house, my chest tightened. Its windows were dark, lifeless. The place looked abandoned, as if no one had lived there for a long time. I knocked on the door, once, twice, again and again. No response. The sound of my knocking must have carried down the street, because a neighbor soon appeared, an elderly man with weary eyes. He looked at me with a puzzled expression and said, "Why are you knocking here? Don't you know? She's gone." My heart skipped a beat. Gone? What do you mean? She died, he said simply, his voice calm, almost casual. More than a month ago. She was alone, so nobody realized it at first. After 3 or 4 days, people noticed, and then she was buried quietly. Only her children and a few close relatives were informed. We didn't want the news to spread too far. The words struck me like thunder. My knees weakened, and I had to steady myself against the wall. My mind reeled back to the night before my aunt waiting outside with the hurricane lamp, the enormous feast, her hollow conversation, her terrible laughter. If she had been dead for a month, then who was I with last night? The neighbor noticed the panic on my face. I explained everything, how I had arrived late at night, how she welcomed me in, how he even slept in my usual guest room. He frowned, clearly troubled, then pulled a set of old keys from his pocket. "I've been keeping the spare keys since her death," he said. "If you want, we can open the house together." With trembling hands, I followed him to the door. The lock clicked open, and we stepped inside. The air was heavy, stale, carrying the musty smell of a place long unoccupied. Dust blanketed every surface. Cobwebs draped from the corners of the ceiling. The dining table was bare, no trace of the food I had eaten the night before. But when I entered the guest room, my blood froze. There, on the bed where I had laid down, was my travel bag, exactly where I had left it the previous night. I stumbled backward, whispering to myself, "No, no, this can't be." My mind screamed that none of it was real, that I had imagined it all. Yet the bag was undeniable proof I had been here. I had stayed in this very room. I turned to the neighbor, but he only shook his head. "This house has been locked since the funeral. Nobody has entered since then. Until today." The weight of his words crushed me. My body trembled uncontrollably as a single horrifying truth wrapped itself around my soul. Last night hadn't been a dream. It hadn't been a hallucination. I had spoken with her. I had eaten her food. I had seen her laugh, and she was already dead. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still hear that laughter echoing in the silence, reminding me that some doors should never be opened, and some visits should never be made. Did you enjoy the story? Let us know in the comments. And if you liked it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Horror Dream. Want more stories like this? Subscribe to The Horror Dream, and we'll bring you more darkness, just for you. If you enjoy a little chill down your spine, stick around, like, share, and hit that subscribe button, right here on The Horror Dream. Your support keeps us going, so stay with us. Subscribe to The Horror Dream for more spine-tingling tales.